Randy and I will react to Brad Gerstner and Bill Gurley, two major venture capitalists with the billions of dollars under management, who discussed how Robotaxi, Tesla FSD Robotaxi will roll out, comparing it to Uber. They own Uber a significant amount as investors, so they have a an Uber perspective as well as a Tesla investor perspective about what this means.
So I have an Uber perspective about many things, but
Right. So we'll take a look
We're going to
at
talk
some of the
about
things they're saying.
autonomous vehicles and whether or not and how they would compete with ride-sharing services.
Right,
And
these imitation models are clearly better than expected at scale. They're having a larger rollout of FSD. So now I think they pushed FSD out to everybody who has the technical capability on their Tesla in order to receive it. They've talked about dramatically lowering the cost of FSD to $99 a month. I think they've hit over 1 billion miles driven now with FSD. And by our estimates, they're adding over 1 billion miles a month. So I think that their confidence that their data advantage is increasing dramatically is going up. So there's some speculation out there. Oh, Elon's throwing the long ball on Robotaxi and all this. I don't believe any of that, right? I think that the conditions that get the company re-excited.
So he was referring there to how does
is going
a
way
Tesla
better than
Robotaxi just copy
expected it would
five-star drivers?
18 months ago.
How does
In
it
terms of the
know
technology,
how
in
to
terms of the
handle an airport?
technology
Because there's certain
that they have
locations they have to
available.
go in order to pick up a passenger from an airport. They just can't go anywhere. They have to go to a specific location to get the people. And so he was saying that they would handle that with a prompt to say go specifically to here. So that it's not like, so by encoding the destination, there's other things they can do, in the prompt to make sure it drives well, but does specifically what they're looking to do. And then they also had discussion about the economics. They think, of course, I think Sternbasher has different views of the economics, but according to people who have some pretty good handle of numbers, feel that the robotaxi needs to be cheaper than regular cars because the economics work out far better if you have a cheaper one. They're thinking that the economic margins might be 15% for a scaled robotaxi versus 7% for the economics aren't necessarily that superior, especially in the early phases.
yeah, because as you said, we've talked before about the various cities, various governments, and whether or not you need to be. First of all, if you're a taxi in many, many cities, you got regulations regarding taxi services. So right away, you've got that issue. In other places, there probably are very limited regulations with regard to taxis. And so you've got that option as well. It was stated the other day, Nevada, for instance, said, look, they haven't been in touch with us, but if they got in touch with us, we'd be able to approve them in weeks, So as this guy, as was pointed out in this particular video, I don't think that's going to be the real limiting factor.
Right. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the things that they're talking about there, because they talk about the economics.
I would think
of the
that Elon
robotaxi.
might approach it, right? He has the potential to be much bigger. Tesla's a much better known brand. There are millions of people with the app already on their phone. Let's just say that's the approach that they take. What is his chance? What are Tesla's chances of breaking into breaking down the network effects that Uber currently has on rideshare demand?
Well, I think you've hit on a key point, which is I think you have to separate Tesla from everybody else. Waymo, and I don't know if Cruise and Aurora still aspire to compete with Waymo or not, but they all have this very high-tech infrastructure with LiDAR that we've talked about. And they're all here to date working on a model where they own and operate all the cars, which we should get into in a little bit because financially, I think that's a complete disaster. Tesla has the benefit that they can utilize theoretically the cars that are already owned by their customers and not have to front the capital for each and every vehicle. If you look at the data we already have. Cruise was losing what, $3 billion? Aurora's public lost $2 billion 2 years ago, $1 billion last year, and virtually no revenue. I have zero reason to believe, and if anyone wants to share data with us to correct this, that Waymo's financials don't look exactly like both of the ones.
What do you think Waymo's worth today?
They did it. We can look up. I mean, it's a private company.
No, I'm asking you.
All we can look up is what it traded for last time. Well, even Aurora is trading at what, $4 billion here with no revenue and $1 billion a year of losses. So there's the Wall Street speculating that the IP has value.
So keep going on Waymo.
But here's the thing. I think it really comes down to supply and demand. There is a beautiful emergent quality of the Uber model where supply and demand are matched, and it's enhanced with price through surcharges. But there are plenty of people who want to make incremental money that know when to get on the road. I have a chart which we can put up, which shows at one point in time the weekly pattern of ride sharing, and it's remarkably nonlinear, right? It peaks in the morning, it peaks in the evening, it really peaks on Friday and Saturday. And Waymo or anyone like them with an owned fleet here's a huge conundrum. Are you going to build the fleet to average or peak? And by the way, you lose whatever your answer is. If you build it to average, you're not going to be able to serve your customers during the peak at all. Like, they're only going to be disappointed. And if you build it to peak, you're going to have a bunch of very, very, very expensive CapEx sitting around doing nothing.
So
the
key points.
I think this is the most critical point.
The losses of the robotaxi companies, the traditional ones like Waymo, I made that point many times. I think you just talked to Saren Basher, talking about the cumulative losses for Waymo for Uber at $30 billion.
Right.
And they lost like $10 billion the last year before this previous year when they became profitable. So 2023 became profitable. 2022, they lost $10 billion. So the losses gained to scale are huge. And they didn't even own the fleet. If you have to buy 1 million robotaxis, that's a $50 to $100 billion, right? So that's a huge extra cost. If you go to like 2 million or 5 million, the costs go even higher. So the capital is just insane. Any reaction to what he just said there?
Yeah, I think all those things are true. I think, again, I have my own particular version of this that I think is the smartest. I may turn out to be completely wrong, but I think you do a deal with Uber, because if Uber doesn't do a deal with you, the Uber drivers that own Teslas are going to go to Tesla. Why in the world would they stay with Uber? So assuming Tesla can put together an app, I think they might have the technological capability of putting together the app. So assuming they can put together the app, and if they have any trouble at all, they just buy Lyft, which is only about $7 billion at the most that you have to pay for Lyft, and then you get all of their data.
I think there's no way they buy Lyft, because Elon not going to spend the money on that.
I'm just saying, if you really felt that there was something that you needed to have in terms of routes and times of
management, data,
data, all that kind of stuff. And maybe you want to just get the licenses on all the cities that Lyft's already in. Maybe that's worth 7 or 5. Anyway, but assuming that no, you don't need that, you make a deal with Uber and or Lyft, because they're crazy if they don't do the deal with you. And then you start getting more and more of those Uber drivers switched over to Tesla cars, and it's a slam dunk. It's an easy. You can even do it supervised for a while that way, and then move away from supervised when you're ready to do that. I just don't know why that wouldn't. Now, in addition, you're inviting the rest of the Tesla community, but maybe the Tesla community has the option of going in under the Uber license also. So now you're getting the best of both worlds. Now, there's one thing that I don't know if these guys ever get to it, but I've been asking this question a lot, and I am convinced that this is true. People will pay more to not have a driver.
They don't discuss that. They don't discuss that. Right.
People
But,
would pay
but
more to
so,
not have that driver yakking in their ear, playing weird music, smelling
Mhm,
up the car, whatever it happens to be.
mhm,
Even the nicest drivers. I mean, I get in the car, I want to be able to work, especially I'm going to the airport tomorrow morning, 2 hour
mhm,
drive, even at 5 a.m. And you know, I don't want the driver to waste my time when I can be working or sleeping or listening to something, somebody else's broadcast. So, yeah, people would pay extra. I've talked to so many people; they would pay extra not to have the driver.
right. So some of their main points are that the that sizing your fleet to peak or to the average amount that you if you go the average amount, then you're missing peaks somehow
Mhm.
if you own the fleet. And if you go to peak, then you have idle capacity. That was a key point
Right.
that he made. But that goes to if you have the Tesla owners
Mhm.
able to come in, so you size to high capacity for your robotaxi fleet,
Right.
and then have other people come in for the peak, then you don't hurt yourself. You still capture some of that stuff. So they make a strong case, something that I felt was the case as well, that you would want to prove out your demand and then use the network of drivers that we currently have. You'd update the current app because currently there is a Tesla app already. You'd be updating that app
Right.
to manage that. And so then that seems to be clear cut. Like some people are saying, oh, they must own the entire thing. And that's only in the end state where it's like everything's proven out and then you can, but even the spiky demand problem suggests why would I go to complete 100% owning the fleet?
Right, right, yeah. And there may be specific circumstances where it makes sense for them to own the fleet. Maybe in certain countries, maybe in certain environments, maybe in certain places that are resort areas or something where there's sporadic use, and so a driver just can't make money. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, a driver, an owner, an independent owner can't make money. But yeah, I see. I come from the bicycle industry, which has a used to have a very traditional, actually still does, a very traditional distribution pattern, manufacturer to wholesaler to dealer to consumer. And that distribution pattern works for a reason. And I think it'll work here too. So if Uber becomes the distributor or the retailer, however you want to look at it,
Mhm.
or no, actually they'd be the distributor and the car owners would be the dealers. I think this would work great. Everybody gets a little money. There's plenty to divide up.
Right. And also there's less financial risk that
Yes.
if you have to get this much capital, like Uber Ray spent $30 billion or whatever, Tesla to own a fleet of 2 million cars, even if it's 25K cars,
Yeah.
right? Then that would be, 2 million cars, it'd be $50 billion,
Right.
right? So yes, Tesla could raise it, but it's like you could be making money all along the way. You don't have to, you know, buy this huge amount to get to network scale and then operate it and then start making the money back. It'd be like, so what do you think about that?
I'm trying to remember, Brian, have you ever heard Elon Musk say that he planned to have his own fleet?
Um, I haven't seen him do that, but they did take the used cars back on lease.
Yes, that's
They
true.
they take about 3,000 back, I think, per week. So it'd be 150,000 per year, but you could buy back from lease, I think, starting 2022. So they built up
You can't buy
100,000.
them back now. You can't buy them back now.
Can I buy them back now? Okay.
So
So
I just looked today.
okay. So then they're have at least 100,000, maybe 200,000 of those vehicles, and they're written down because they were on 3-year lease.
I don't think they have those vehicles.
You don't think they have the vehicle?
No, they've been selling them.
They've been selling them.
They've made a lot of money over the last couple of years reselling those used vehicles. They have the
Okay.
used vehicles that they get in trade, and then they get the used vehicles they have in the leasing. But yeah, they're not 150,000 cars. They would have parking lots all over the country filled with
Okay.
these cars just rotting.
Okay.
Yeah,
So previously they said, okay, you can buy them back, but then they said, okay, now you can because they had the high used car prices So
Right.
they made their money off that right away.
Yes.
And then now you said that they've
They're not,
stopped.
definitely not right now. You cannot get your car back at the end of the lease.
So that's about 3,000 cars per week. So they're
A lot of,
accumulating
yeah, right. They
cars.
are accumulating those. Yeah.
So
Okay.
if
So
that
that
started a
would,
month,
yeah. Yeah.
so if it
So,
started a month ago,
yeah.
then 5 months up to August 8th, they're accumulating used cars.
Right.
So that would be 20 weeks times 3,000. They get 60,000 used
That's a
cars.
lot.
They could launch then or next year or something like that at 60,000 or 120,000 because they could then accumulate used cars. So then those are basically their 25,000 a car because a used Tesla would be that lower price one. They could flip on FSD
Mhm.
if someone didn't buy it because they're
Right.
all ready for
Right.
that. So then they would add that in to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what they do because I could definitely make a case for never having your own fleet unless you just couldn't find enough drivers.
Right. Well, I think there's high usage zones,
Yeah.
Manhattan, other places where okay, I'm going to be using this thing all the time. It's, you know, the economics work out perfectly, and then I'm willing to own these because these are really profitable
Right.
units.
Right.
Other downtown areas, right to airports, that kind of stuff. So you would skim off the best locations for yourself,
Right.
and then the ones that are still good but marginal, and I don't want to own the vehicle, but I can I'm still getting my cut, running the app, running the network, and I give some to Uber and anyone else who's willing to take a lower return, for people like Airbnb owners, you're getting incremental money. Like I
Yeah.
own the property, and then for me, the economic great.
Right.
My economics aren't as great as the Hilton or the Four Seasons, but plenty good for me. And so it's a win-win for Tesla. So I think that's clear that would be the case for them.
Yeah, again, the only benefit I can see to Tesla, other than trying to fill in gaps where they don't have the enough drivers, the only benefit I can see to them would be the win on profits, and I just don't think that is going to be at the top of mind in this situation. So, because when the trade-off on that profits is the capital, putting the capital out there, and as they pointed out. I mean, I know about the peaks and the troughs, but then when you start thinking it through, so for instance, my son has done Uber Eats. I mean, he has been a driver for Uber Eats, um, and for the other one, where you pick up the Costco, you pick up the groceries, yeah, the DoorDash, or it's picking up the groceries for somebody at Costco or whatever. And he quickly learned, okay, this is where most of the action is. This is when most of the action is. And because it was part-time for him and just something as an addition, then he rescheduled himself to those times. So that's again, the huge benefit of the owned cars by people like you and me. Maybe I only want to put mine out on Friday and Saturday night when the big rush is, and I don't necessarily have any place to go on Friday or Saturday night.
Right. Right. So they also discuss the prices of the vehicles. I think they make the case that the economics, need a far lower price vehicle. So if that's a used vehicle or a lower cost vehicle, if it's a high price vehicle, that's problematic. Other people run models like CERN that say that, you can still have a higher price vehicle and still works. But obviously, if you have the choice, you'd go with a lower priced vehicle.
Well, one of the big things is depreciation. And so when you normally think of an ICE car that's going to be a piece of junk at 200,000 miles that you basically have no residual value in, and you're talking about these cars, which are going to be designed to go 500,000, 600,000, and all of a sudden your depreciation, your component of your expense drops dramatically.
So based on some of these things, what does that mean for August 8th? Do they reveal the full system? When would they come out with a service? It seemed like they would start with the the using the Tesla owner drivers, and then you would start adding in these used Teslas, and then you could start making some vehicles, but you wouldn't be depending upon scaling the vehicles, the new 25K car, right?
Again, I have my perfect solution. If Elon isn't listening, send him the video if you know him. To me, it's so obvious. Even if you think the system is 1000% ready to go, it would be amazing. I think the public would appreciate it. Give it a couple of months with supervised drivers. And what does that mean? That means a deal with Uber. I think you do the deal with Uber. That way on August 9th, the day after, nobody's sitting around waiting for your deal. You don't have to say, oh, we're going to do this in 3 months or 6 months. No, the next day, the licenses are in place for every city in every important city in the world, or it's certainly in the United States. The drivers are in place, the cars are in place, because there's a bunch of those cars that are Teslas. You can add me and Brian if we're interested. We can be added to the Uber fleet. It's done, and then have them supervised for a month or for 2 months. Believe me, though, some at least of those Uber drivers will be perfectly happy to sit at home 2 months later and let their car do the driving, and they maybe buy a second car or a third car because they know how it works.
So they make a last point. Let's go to that.
It turned out that the resale value on those cars was dramatically less than they had forecast, and the CEO lost his job over this. I think the write down for Hertz was like $1 billion. Over this misforecast. So if you're in the business of buying and maintaining that fleet on behalf of Tesla, you're doing so with full knowledge that all of this is hard to forecast. So you're going to bake into your model a huge margin of safety, right? So that you're not going to have the problem that Hertz just ran into.
I would say, based on everything I know, and we're not, in the boardroom with these guys, but like, letting the customers own the Teslas that own the fleet is a
much better
alternative.
Much better. And I will say this, the fact that we're even talking about a Robotaxi fleet shows you the incredible progress that Tesla has made. And, and what we talked about on the show a few weeks ago, the month-to-month improvement in the model, the data that they're collecting, and, just the anecdote I shared from last night, I am more convinced than I ever have that we're going to see tons of cars on the roads with no drivers, in the years ahead. You and I are just speculating as to how the business model might come together.
But by the way, one last thing, I'm so sorry. I do think there's an argument that you might see this be prolific in a different country soon.
Of course.
Both China and India have much higher road deaths per mile. So you could see the government wanting it to happen. China, being more autocratic, could just wave their hand and change insurance rates, mandates. They could just make it a reality. Whereas we in the U.S., with the way our litigation and regulation work, are very unlikely to clear the decks and make way for something.
I also think, as I mentioned earlier, Tesla and Uber coexist in a ton of markets around the world. And there are a lot of markets that, frankly, are more innovative than the United States, have less regulatory headwinds. I could see this happening in Abu Dhabi or Dubai. I could see this happening in Singapore. I could see this happening in South America. I could see this happening in Mexico. There are a ton of jurisdictions where I expect this, unfortunately, before I expect it in the U.S., at scale.
Okay, so Singapore, I thought about Singapore just a little while ago. Singapore, I could say, because Singapore is basically a dictatorship. They call themselves a democracy, but it's really
they're a corporation.
It is a corporation. It is a benevolent dictator. That's what it is. But I could see Singapore outlawing driver cars.
So Singapore, I've been at talks where the leadership of Singapore has been there, like in Silicon Valley, and they come and give talks and discuss, the advantage of Singapore. So Singapore is a very well managed city, almost 6 million people, about 300 square miles. So I think it's about 6 times the size of San Francisco proper. And what those city managers said was that Singapore is a place where you go to um, prove technology and systems at city scale.
Yeah.
So at city state scale,
Yeah.
you can then deploy 5,000, 10,000,
Right.
and they're willing to adopt things, technology and stuff, and deploy them at city scale if it makes sense. They look at, very technocratic,
Mhm.
looking at the numbers and
Yep.
saying, here's how to make it work. We have the bus and other things, and we're going to integrate that in. And they can, of course, make the decisions right away that would make a deployment happen. So they can say, okay, we'll do this zone, and now that works, and the whole thing and like that. So,
Well, and moreover, they're extremely restrictive on the number of cars they allow on their island.
yeah,
So when I was over there a couple, 3, 4 years ago, obviously the place is clean and safe and everything else that they talk about. It's unbelievable. But you don't see traffic jams at all. Okay. Most people take the train, even middle-class people and upper middle-class people take the train because it's clean and it's safe. And it runs on time, all that kind of stuff that happens in dictatorships. But anyway, I no, literally, they could say, we have Managua. It's an island in Michigan where there are no cars allowed.
okay.
Okay, so I mean, there's in France, there's EZ, the city of EZ, no cars allowed. So I can imagine that Singapore could just say, you know what, you cannot, no drivers, period.
Right.
You take a robotaxi or you take a train. That's how it would work. That would be crazy. That'd be a real test case.
So, I would say that, Singapore, not much a dictatorship so much as Disneyland, Disney World with the death penalty. So, and they just use it. But the thing is, if you're going there, you would know, okay, I cannot go, do drugs or something like that because that's the death penalty thing.
That's
If
right.
I spit on the street,
It's
that's a
over.
$1,000 fine, right? So the penalties are clear.
Yes.
And the certainty of punishment is clear,
There. Yes.
right? So that's the main thing. It's just like I can't go into, the boardroom at GE or and then expect to do a bunch of stuff. It's because, the behavior and the rules are clear. Anyway, so onto the thing. They can do that and Abu Dhabi, the other places, Dubai, they're competing as Singapore,
Right.
technological paradises where you can, do it. Just like Disney World could say, okay, I'm going to deploy vehicles inside the grounds, right? They control everything within the zone, right? Other places like Monaco, other places. So you can have these controlled areas where they choose to do it. And Singapore wants to be leading that.
Yes. No, it makes
they have
total sense.
Yeah.
Makes total sense. I can see South Korea potentially also. I mean, South Korea and Tokyo are really no different than Singapore in terms of their cleanliness and safety and their technological, being technologically advanced. And so Seoul would be a pretty big city to switch over 100% to robotaxis, but I could see them maybe phasing it in over a certain amount of time.
The one at scale is China. They discussed it.
Yeah.
India may do it, but China would move faster, I would think.
Right.
And so they could look at the numbers on it and say, okay, as they said, 300,000, 500,000 deaths per year from traffic accidents. It's also many severe injuries from the traffic accidents.
Right.
So being able to resolve that, they say, okay, it's 10 times safer. So we see the numbers, they work. It will reduce the load on a hospital. They can look at it from that overall view to say, and they said, we'll push it through and then make it happen. Another thing would be, it would help because you go to electric cars instead of gas cars within cities. The urban pollution problem would greatly reduce. Because urban pollution is like a 7% GDP hit for China.
Yeah.
So if I suddenly say I'm shifting all the rides, billions of rides per day going over to electric vehicles.
Right.
So then the smaller number of vehicles can handle this larger number. and suddenly the air becomes cleaner because they have dictated and moved all kinds of factories from near Beijing over to Tibet and Mongolia and other places. So they can say by dictate, you must move over there.
Right. Right.
And so this would allow them to clean up the quality of their air for most of the people
Quickly. Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So that would be, hospital benefits, medical benefits. It would be a very rapid economic benefit that could give them like a 10% boost to their economy, in an instant, and also the more efficient traveling around.
Super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So that could be a far faster thing. And they could also, in terms of like working with a company in China, Didi is the company that is the Uber of
Right.
and another one. But the main one is Didi because the Uber could not compete in China. So then they did a deal with Didi to say, okay, we'll split up the world, and then so that I think is what happens. I think within 2 years I could see, and if things go right, that would be what Tesla would do at scale.
Yeah.
Would be China, Singapore, and those other places. Yeah. Maybe even next year, maybe even sooner. We'll see.
Could be crazy times.
Yes.
Crazy times.
Okay. Sounds good. Talk next time.